Looking back at events after the fact is just a nuts thing to do, so let's go back to 2009 and WrestleMania 25. And do you know what the general consensus was back then? People were going, well, I don't have that much interest in it, maybe I'll catch it at some point. But now when we think about it from a 2020 perspective, we all go, my gosh, Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels, that could be one of the best WWE matches ever. Now, just to spark the comments, my favourite Taker versus HBK match is actually the Hell in a Cell from Bad Blood 1997, but I'm also a piece of trash and deserve to be thrown in the garbage, so we put that one to bed. But if you can believe it, and this kind of ties into topical events, Shawn Michaels and Mark Calloway were very invested in not only the storyline, but the match itself. So it's almost like these wrestler dudes know what they're doing, they understand their characters, and maybe they should be allowed some more input in the direction they're about to head. I don't know, seems crazy to me. It is such a topsy-turvy event though, because you also get Triple H versus Randy Orton in a blood feud, and yet when they get in the ring, they basically just have a standard wrestling match, and John Cena was described as one of the biggest wastes of a top guy at a WrestleMania in WWE in years. Now, personally, I think that's very unfair, but hey, I read it all on the internet. He was, of course, going for the WWE title as he took on Edge and The Big Show. Do you want to know what the story arc here was? It turned out that General Manager of SmackDown, Vicky Guerrero, was having an affair with Big Show, but at the same time, she was dating Edge. So when you put it like that, yeah, I can kind of understand. I mean, it ain't like Stone Cold Steve Austin was walking to the ring, getting a microphone and going, hell yeah, I'm banging the general manager. So maybe you do have a point. Better than all this, though, is that WrestleMania 25 is when we got a celebrity appearance by Mickey Rourke, who had a little beef with Chris Jericho, and I love this story, I love it so damn much. As you can probably figure out, at one point they were meant to have a proper match, but Mickey Rourke's people got in his ear, they're like, no, don't do it, Mickey, it may affect your chances of getting an Oscar for the film he had just starred in that just so happened to be called The Wrestler. But do you want to know the real reason he decided not to get in the squared circle? Because he convinced himself that Chris Jericho was gonna beat him up for real. He had seen Jericho doing the promotional rounds where he kept going, I'm gonna take my fist and jab it into Mickey Rourke's eyes, which by the way is all that wrestling is, and he had decided that this may actually happen and therefore he was gonna stay well away from it. I mean, talk about the stupidity and talk about the irony given that his job is an actor. It's why when he was shown sitting in the crowd next to him, he had Frank Shamrock, who he had taken from the mixed martial art world because he wanted some legitimate protection. And this just keeps on giving, because when Vince McMahon heard about this, he turned to Jericho and he said, well, if anything does kick off, you can take out Mickey Rourke and I will go after the small guy. And the small guy, once again, was Frank Shamrock, former UFC champion. I mean, if that doesn't sum up Vince McMahon's mindset, I don't know what does. Personally, I think it all worked out for the best because we get that incredible match against Ricky Steamboat, and don't worry, I'm going to go crazy when we do talk about it. And if you care about WWE films in other news, 12 Rounds had just come out, and well, it had bombed. Taz was also getting ready to leave the company as a commentator, and 11 years later, he's now in AEW, which is just crazy times. And word on the street was Shawn Michaels was now walking a little bit gingerly backstage, as if his knees had given up on him, and as if he was about to retire. On top of that, John Cena had also called The Rock out on MTV News for not wrestling anymore. I wonder where that one could go. And so it was that in front of 70,000 fans at the Reliance Stadium in Texas, we did have WrestleMania 25. Let's take the finger of power and let's up those downs. Right, so WrestleMania 25. The big push from WWE was that it's the 25th anniversary of WrestleMania, and look, I don't want to get into it. I know technically that's not true, but one day I'm gonna be dead, I'm gonna die, and I don't want to waste any of my life trying to explain the way that WWE just so happens to see this. The point is the intro began with all these big wrestlers looking back over WrestleMania and saying what their favorite WrestleMania moments was, and the best of these is Chris Jericho, because he says, you want to know what my favorite WrestleMania moment was? Any one that I was in. What a damn dick. And what I really like about this week's ups and downs is because you did choose WrestleMania 25, and last week you chose WrestleMania 24, we can now see how certain wrestlers have performed in the 12-month period between the two. And kind of oddly, at first it was like I was watching the same show. Because not only is it the Money in the Bank ladder match, not only does CM Punk win, But when MVP comes out, he is wearing the United States Championship, and I swear, in this era, MVP just had that belt. Didn't matter if he won it, didn't matter if he lost it, it didn't even matter if he was the actual champion. Someone just said, oh, it's WrestleMania, make sure you said oomph out there with that damn belt. Here too, you do get Punk, Mark Henry, Fit Finlay, MVP, Shelton Benjamin, Kofi Kingston, Kane, and of all people, Christian. I got my script wrong, you meant to flip those last two names around, and I tell you, I know I said it last week, I'm gonna say it again, I just really like the Money in the Bank being the traditional opener of WrestleMania. It didn't really last that long to say it was a tradition, but I want WWE to bring it back, even though that ain't never gonna happen. Kofi Kingston's ability is also just showcased throughout all this, and it's absolutely crazy. Somehow over the year period, Fit Finlay is now more Irish than ever, because that's WWE, and some of the falls off ladders through tables, well, the impact is just unreal. There's no way it doesn't hurt. Like this. Of course it hurts, but I did it anyway for entertainment. Benjamin also completely botches a sunset flip over the top of a ladder onto MVP, and thankfully he didn't die. I was worried he was going to. And then I thought about sitting down and writing WWE a letter, because Christian and Kane are on top of the ladder, and they told me that Kane gave him a choke slam, and I was like, bullshit to that World Wrestling Entertainment. That was a push. Don't you start confangling my moves. I mean, honestly, if that was a choke slam, I'm calling this a buzz cut. It's not a buzz cut, I'm flipping bald. It was your typical ladder match tease though, because just as it seemed like Kane was gonna grab the briefcase, CM Punk like transports himself in from the holodeck or something, he boots the big red machine in the face, down he goes, and yeah, for the second year running, and the first time anyone ever done this, CM Punk is your Money in the Bank. And this did remind me of a story of my own, and I was like, is this actually a good thing when it comes to Punk? Basically, back in 2008, so around about this time, I won an award called Rising Star, and I was really proud, but then I got worried. Because like, well, if I win it again in 12 months, it means my star hasn't risen, so have I failed? And I kind of felt the same about this. It's also kind of true when it does come to the voice of the voiceless, because it would be 2 more years before he got to where he deserved. My word, what a great ride it was. And so yes, it's not the best Money in the Bank ladder match you're ever going to see, but it's still damn flipping good. In fact, usually, that's always the way. And then it happened. And I remember that it did happen, but I think I've been spending the last decade or so trying to push this knowledge out of my head, because for 15 minutes after this carnage, you get a Kid Rock concert. Look, if you like Kid Rock, that's absolutely fine, but I don't sit down to WrestleMania to see Kid Rock perform. Really, the crowd was divided on this too. Because some of them were going crazy and others were a bit like, man, is this actually gonna go on for 15 minutes? And it gets even more strange, because when he's performing his last song, all the women for the Women's Battle Royal come out and kind of just do sexy movements as they walk past. I felt like I was in some kind of fever dream and it's getting it down. I mean, it is awkward. It is really awkward. It's like you're the stepdad and you just joined a new family and you've gone to watch your stepkid's Christmas pageant, but then, oh no, when you get there, there's the real dad. Awkward. It also means the Women's Battle Royal starts off terribly, because why would you walk down the aisle side by side with your opponent? You tried to punch them, but also, no offense, this is such a rushed mess. Down. It's also kind of difficult to talk about now, because of course the winner of this was Santina Marella, which was just Santino Marella in drag. Now I'm going to be honest with you, back in 2009, I thought this was quite funny, because I thought everything Santino Marella did was quite funny. He was great at his character, but I do understand and appreciate the problem now. It basically just craps all over an entire division. I mean, what did it say about women's wrestling in general? And of course it led to the women's revolution that would happen years later. But yeah, this is not the way that you should be portraying people that are really good at their job. Or in short, they were basically treated like a joke. Now, I'm not going to run down the 25 competitors here, because we'd be in it all day, but the very worst bit is when Santina Marella does win, the commentators are told to pretend that they've never seen this person before in their life, even if a moron could have just looked at it and gone, well, that's clearly Santina Marella. I swear, this is something WWE has to stop. If I'm sitting at home on my stupid fat ass and I can figure it out, why can't you? You're like 10 foot from the ring. When they just pretended, they had no idea who this mysterious woman was. Like, if I do this, you all of a sudden get confused, and you're like, wait a minute, I thought I was watching Simon Miller. Who the hell is this guy? It's no wonder the likes of Trish Stratus, Lita, and Wendy Richter went, look, I really appreciate you getting in touch, but I don't want anything to do with it. But that said, the rumours at the time did suggest that Trish Stratus had been in negotiations to appear, but they had fallen out. Maybe they literally offered her peanuts or something. It's also really bizarre because true legendary figures like Sunny and Molly Holly are only identified once they've been thrown out of there, so why do we do it to begin with? This really was a waste of 5 minutes of my life, And that's right, it only goes on for 5 minutes. Like Booker flipping tea. What was next though, oh my gosh, I loved it so damn much, is getting it up. Because Chris Jericho had decided that he hated the past, and because of that he was going to take on 3 legendary figures, Roddy Piper, Jimmy Snuka, and of course Ricky the Dragon Fire Steamboat. And don't even worry about Roddy Piper and Jimmy Snuka, and I say that with all due respect, but look, right now, if The Rock walked onto my little set and I stood here with a massive sign saying, oh my gosh, I've got something incredible to tell you, you wouldn't care about that, even if The Rock was just stood here smiling, because it's the flipping Rock. He is going to steal your attention away, and that is exactly what Steamboat did here. And why? Because he is 56 years old in 2009, and he was a better wrestler than anybody else I'd ever seen in my life. Now that is massive hyperbole, but WWE kind of knew this too, because Roddy Piper and Jimmy Snuka are out there in around about 5 minutes, and then it is just the Chris Jericho and Ricky Steamboat show, and they have such a good one-on-one match. And look, yes, did Steamboat miss a few spots here and there? Of course he did, but he's 56 flipping years old. If I can even get out of bed when I'm in mid-50s, I'm gonna be doing backflips, which doesn't make any sense. This is so good, and I won't hear otherwise. And the legends, as they were being called, were never going to win, but it is still so worth your time. And I tell you, if I'm even half a good a wrestler ever in my life, there's Ricky Steamboat, then I will be the best wrestler on the planet. I know that doesn't make any sense. Also forgot I was wearing the wig. Fantastic. Anyway, he does lose after Jericho smashed him with the code breaker, and then Ric Flair's in there to try to defend his friend's honor, and he gets code breakered as well. And of course, we only do this to set up our spot with Mickey Rourke, and I'm gonna say that it's okay at best. I mean, it's basically average. Because Mickey Rourke comes out of the crowd, the two get in the ring, and apparently Mickey Rourke used to be a boxer, so he punches Chris Jericho, but you could barely call it a punch. Even my mum would be embarrassed to call that a punch. Basically just grazes his face, and poor Y2J has to throw his ass right on the ground. But you know, WrestleMania loves celebrities, whatever. Still, as a WrestleMania segment overall, I did think it was damn good, and it's all I need in my life. That and pizza. What followed was Matt Hardy versus Jeff Hardy, and we have talked about this before. Despite being one of the best tag teams ever, when they did have singles competition, it was never bad, but it never really smashed it like you hoped. The catch here, however, was that it was an Extreme Rules contest, and of course that suited them down to the bone, and yeah, it's pretty damn fun. As for the build, however, well, not so much, because WWE decided to use Jeff Hardy's very real personal problems when his house burned down and his dog died, and brought it into the story and said, oh, by the way, that was all caused by none other than Matt Hardy, which just meant every single wrestling fan went, well, if that is the case, why are you allowing him to wrestle? Shouldn't he be locked in jail? And the answer is yes, he should have gone weeks ago. And there was a ton of good ideas here, to be fair, but clearly they had been told, you are not allowed to go past 13 minutes, otherwise we'll fire you. And knowing Vince McMahon, there's a good chance he actually did say those words, but they are just speeding through things so fast. It also is a big reminder that Jeff Hardy should be dead. I mean, that is too much. But at one point, he lays Matt Hardy on a table outside, puts a chair on him, then puts another table on top and just dives through it through the top rope, and this easily hurts Jeff Hardy more than it hurts Matt Hardy, and then he follows that up by getting back in the ring. He gets 2 massive ladders out, and he vaults one ladder over the other one to do a leg drop, and Matt Hardy moves, and Jeff Hardy lands right on his back, and I went, well, that's it. His coccyx has got to be up his ass. It allows Matt to pick him up and hit a twist of fate while Jeff's head is in a flipping chair. I'm not gonna lie, that was a great ending, and he does get the victory, but it also means on WrestleMania, which is meant to be a feel-good show, the attempted murderer just beat his innocent brother. I mean, this one is a real crazy feast. I do think this is the best match they've ever had, though. But saying that, I haven't actually gone through every single one of their single matches recently, so now I'm just saying things, but it does fit very nicely on this card. Remember what I said about Time 2 and maybe WWE being a little bit up against it? JBL versus Rey Mysterio for the Intercontinental title, 20 seconds. 20 seconds. Now there was a reason for this, and that reason is that JBL was retiring on this evening, and he was in such bad shape with injuries, this is basically all he could do. There's a tease beforehand where Bradshaw does beat the hell out of Rey before the bell rings. When it does ring, Mysterio hits the 619, he hits the splash, and then he pins Bradshaw, 1, 2, 3, new IC champ. JBL said that he quit afterwards because he actually was quitting, and fair play to that guy. I know he's a controversial figure, and I agree with a lot of the things that people say, but he deliberately played this so he wouldn't get any emotion, and he left the company in the right way by putting another guy over pretty damn hard. Still though, it doesn't get an up and it doesn't get a down, mostly because most of my bathroom trips are longer than this, and I wouldn't give that an up or down either. That would make me a psychopath. It worked in one sense though, because it acted as a great buffer for what was about to come next, which of course was The Undertaker taking on Shawn Michaels. And some people say that this one is the best, and some people say that WrestleMania 26 is the best. I've already talked about Bad Blood 97. The point is, they're all amazing, and if you want to give them all golden ups, I'm not going to argue with you, which of course means golden up. The story was just top two because HBK had pretty much outdone The Undertaker during the entire build to this, so the dead man walked in really pissed off, and because the fans in the arena are just divided down the middle, the atmosphere is just to die for. And it really is perfect. I mean that from the bottom of my toes. It really is perfect. It is everything you want from a professional wrestling match. Michaels especially was happy to blur the lines here, because at one point he's like, oh, my knee hurts so much, but he's playing possum, and then he just whams Undertaker right in the face. And the sheer amount of reversals and transitions of this are just truly, truly brilliant. Like, if you want to suspend your disbelief watching a match, this should be one of your go-tos. At one point, Undertaker goes for a choke slam, and Michaels reversed that into a crossface. It is one of the most attractive things I've ever seen. Damn well sure more attractive than me. You then get both guys trying to break themselves, because Michaels goes for a moonsault off the top rope to the outside and absolutely misses, and then Undertaker goes from that dive over the top rope, and you must have seen that footage 100 times. WWE played it over and over and over again, mostly because it looked like the flipping man was killed. And the final fact for that as well is that the cameraman was meant to catch him, because the cameraman was WWE superstar Sim Snooker, and as you can imagine, when they got to the back, he was in a lot of bother, and it's probably one of the reasons we never ever saw him again. I'm not saying he was dead. That sounded like WWE killed him. He was just shown the door and went, well, you couldn't do that for one of our biggest stars, so you can go. He's not dead. From here, it is just unreal. A sweet chin music gets kicked out of, a last ride gets turned into a sunset flip, and then a tombstone pile driver gets kicked out of, and then another tombstone pile driver gets turned into a DDT. It is madness, and they don't screw any of this up. I can't even screw up walking downstairs to having a cup of coffee. These guys are doing an incredible match in front of 70,000 people. Whereas if WWE would tell you 200,000. I mean, it is just smoother than my head, and the finish will make you fall on the floor and just feel orgasmic. Because Shawn Michaels goes for one final moonsault, The Undertaker catches him, gives him a pretty damn devastating tombstone pile driver, and 1, 2, 3, this is done. But does the Phenom look like a winner? No, he does not. He collapses on the floor, he's given it all, and he's got nothing left. I mean, look, it really is as good now as it was in 2009, and even when we are in the year 2047 million, whatever the hell that would be, people will still be able to sit down and watch this and go, well, that's a pretty good damn wrestling match. And is it one of the best WWE matches ever? You bet your ass. And then John Cena and the Warring Lovers, The Big Show and Edge, have to go out there and fight for the world title. And it really sounds like it should just fall down and explode. I actually thought it was pretty damn fun. Now the crowd is a little bit spent, so that does hurt the match, but the sheer juxtaposition, there's a big word for you, is so funny. Because this is the John Cena entrance when he comes out with all the other John Cena looking like rappers, and then Vicky Guerrero is wheeled out there by Chavo, and you're like, well, we got this one over the top entrance, and then we had this. It also made me laugh because straight away Texas go, wait, we're meant to boo John Cena, and they just hurl down upon them, and then WWE goes all WWE. On commentary, Jim Ross tells us that the Big Show weighs 485 pounds, and then seconds later, Lillian Garcia goes, weighing in at 441 pounds. The Big Show, all right, that's a pretty good damn diet program. He just dropped all that weight in seconds. Otherwise, much like Mania 24, it's just every single WWE triple threat match you've ever seen, but the formula works. Chavo is being a dick on the outside, trying to help out Vicky Guerrero, but then they get their comeuppance when Edge goes to spear John Cena. He moves and goes careering into Vicky Guerrero, so she's out of it, and the whole time Big Show is just walking around going, oh, I'm really big, I'm a giant. Because that's what he did. And the true highlight is when John Cena picks up the Big Show and Edge at the same time in the AA position, and what really makes me mad is there's always one guy that goes, well, it wasn't that impressive because he only did it for a few seconds. Are you kidding me? For starters, even if he did it for half a second, it's pretty damn incredible, but also he doesn't drop them. Edge falls off like the numpty that it is. Not true, I really like Edge. We are truly in John Cena town in 2009 though, so even though that does happen, he gives Big Show the AA, he then grabs Edge and gives him the AA onto the Big Show, and then he pins the Giant, because I suppose that looked more impressive, but really, he just beat both guys. He also does become the world champion for the 92nd time, whatever the hell it was, and I tell you, I mean it from my bones, I honestly thought this was more than fine after everyone had told me that it absolutely sucked. You may find it odd too that we haven't talked about our Hall of Fame induction ceremony spot yet, and that's because it becomes here before the main event, simply because the lead guy going in 2009 was none other than Stone Cold Steve Austin. So right before we do have our final match, the Rattlesnake comes out on an ATV, and not only do the fans go absolutely crazy because of course they're in Texas, but Stone Cold enjoys this so much, especially when he starts reversing it down the aisle like a madman. I defy anyone to try and watch this and not laugh and smile like a child. I mean, it is kind of a problem with modern day WWE that I still react this way to seeing an old guard dude such as this, and he finishes it off by drinking a bunch of beer and celebrating with Jim Ross, and it truly is one of the best things with the show. So I get it, I'm the problem, but we'll run that into the ground and it's getting it up. It's also indicative of how bizarrely laid out WrestleMania 25 is. Because then we do move into the main event, which as you can figure out is Randy Orton versus Triple H for the WWE title. And I can totally understand that. The WWE title is the biggest prize in the game. But anybody could have figured out that Undertaker and Shawn Michaels probably should have taken this spot, especially given the layout. I mean, what the hell is going on? Because during the build, as mentioned, not only had Triple H done a home invasion on Randy Orton's house, but Orton had beaten up Stephanie McMahon and kissed her, and that was way, way creepy as he'd handcuffed Triple H to the ropes. We also saw the return of Shane and Vince McMahon because they couldn't believe it. Cody Rhodes and Ted DiBiase were involved. It felt like they were going to ruin and destroy, maybe even murder each other. I mean, there was also rules that if Triple H used a sledgehammer, he'd be disqualified and the belt would go to the Viper. So why the hell didn't they just try and kick the crap out of each other? You listen to the crowd, you can hear an audible groan. This is the last thing they wanted. I don't blame them. I really don't. It makes absolutely no sense. And if you can believe it, the main event of a WrestleMania, and this is going to be rare, is getting it down. And also, when it comes to the finish of this, I mean, it would just blow your mind because the referee's running around like, oh, I'm a WWE official. I don't know what I'm doing. So Triple H gets the sledgehammer anyway. He smashes it into Randy Orton's head, gives him the pedigree, and pins him and retains the belt after the 1, 2, 3. So as a fan, you're like, okay, well, I guess he's going to tie into Raw. Randy Orton's going to come out and go, he used a sledgehammer. It's not fun, but it doesn't do that. It just peters out. Barely anybody mentions it. So you're like, why the hell did I invest all my time in this? It is like running into a brick wall. So it's just a bust, to be honest. We should have kept this simple, and we didn't. And the fact you never see Vince McMahon or Shane McMahon or Cody Rhodes or Ted DiBiase is even stranger. And again, go back and look at what the audience is doing for large portions of this match. They're looking at the entranceway, they're looking at the aisleway, because they expect to see someone. And throughout WrestleMania, you saw Randy Orton hanging out with Cody Rhodes and Ted DiBiase. You saw Triple H hanging out with the McMahons. Why would you tease that and then not deliver? It is baffling. So it's a shame. It's a real shame. And like I said, I think Randy Orton is one of the best ever. I think Triple H is one of the best ever. But this did not work. And you never want to end WrestleMania like that. You want to end it feeling all warm, fuzzy, and excited in your tum-tum. But overall, especially because before I did watch this, everyone was saying, oh, WrestleMania 25 is really crap. Well, I massively disagreed. I had a great time. I mean, mostly because you have one of the best wrestling matches ever right there in the middle. But there's good stuff around it too. There's also a lot of crap. But either way, it's getting it up. It's also very important that we do go through Dave Meltzer's Wrestling Observer star ratings this week because it will make you go absolutely crazy unless you're a normal person and realize it's just one man's opinion. But the Money in the Bank ladder match gets 3.75 stars. The Miss WrestleMania Battle Royal gets a dud. Can't argue with that one. The Jericho match gets 2 stars, a little bit unfair because Ricky Steamboat is the best. Matt Hardy versus Jeff gets 3.25 stars. Rey Mysterio versus JBL gets not rated, me and Dave on the same page. And Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker gets 4.75 stars. I never really understood why it wasn't 5. I mean, what else have these guys got to do? But again, remember, it's just one man's brain. It don't matter. John Cena winning the World Heavyweight Championship gets 3.25 stars. And Triple H versus Randy Orton gets 2.5 stars, which I actually think is a little bit generous. Now, please do leave us a comment below and give us your star ratings for that Undertaker match. I'd love to see them. But also suggest the shows for next week. The best ones will go into the poll. You are in control. Then like the video, share the video, and subscribe. Head over to WhatCulture.com, read yourself some articles, follow WhatCulture on Twitter, WhatCulture WWE, and watch more videos here on WhatCulture Wrestling, especially old retro ups and downs, which now kind of sounds like a paradox. My name is Simon for WhatCulture. Thank you as always for joining me. I am loving this journey. I'll see you soon.